So she knew that he was gone when they called her from Charlie Hooper's to say that Steve had been taken to an ambulance, in an ambulance to the hospital after a heart attack. Steve and his son Colin and their 4 close friends had stopped after the Chiefs game on Christmas night 2016 to celebrate. She knew, Linda knew that he was gone. She knew that 32 years they had together had been so rich, and that the last 6 had really been treasured time, borrowed time. It had been 6 years since he had had the second heart attack at their home, and she had done CPR to keep him going. The 3 children there, the paramedic on the line coaching her while they waited for the paramedics to arrive. The loss of Steve was a big one for all of us who knew him. What a radiant soul, the kind of person who would do anything for anyone. He offered these beautiful prayers. He lived and believed Dr. King's vision. He adored his family. He was faithful to his legal clients. He was such a tremendous person. And in the end, there was a great deal of comfort knowing that everything had been done. He took exquisite care of himself, his running, his exercise, his diet. And Linda took comfort too, knowing that even though nothing could be done, people had tried. They had tried at Charlie Hooper's. They had tried at the hospital until she knew it was time to say enough. Alex Franzen said, "The goal is always to try." That's what she remembered from the CPR course she had taken decades ago. The instructor had started off, of course, the goal was to keep someone alive, but the instructor had said, what if it's too late? What if the person is already gone? What do? You try anyway. You try because there might be someone in the crowd who will see you acting heroically and bravely, even under stress, and think, I need to learn to do that. And that person might learn CPR and they might save someone's life because you tried. You should try anyway, because even if you can't bring that person back, you can keep their organs going until they can be transported. And someone might see, someone might touch, someone might live because you tried. You should try anyway, because even if you can't save the person, you can bring the family peace. You can help them move through their grief and to get to closure, knowing that every single thing had been done. Of course, Franzen wasn't just talking about the body in front of you. She was talking about the world. What do you do when things look so bleak and feel so futile? What do you do when the glaciers are melting? Do you keep recycling? Do you keep trying to register people to vote when people won't abide by the results of an election? What do you do when it's not a person with a diseased heart, but it's a country whose heart has grown so cold and so dark and so hardened? In any other time, the report released Thursday about family separation would have been front page news, above the fold news. You remember the policy of family separation, 2017, 2018, when those 3,000 children were taken from their family at the border? The pictures of the children in the cages and the stories of the reporters, the children without soap, with not enough to eat, without toothbrushes and blankets, and the stories of 6-year-olds trying to care for 2-year-olds, children as young as 4 and 5 months taken away from their nursing mother. And today, 628 children are still lost, no family to claim them, in some temporary shelter. And the report said it wasn't a mistake, that the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, the Trump administration, Stephen Miller, knew that would be the result. They were told and they were warned. And when they saw it, they said, take those kids away. There's room for disagreement on immigration. So we have a tight border, we have an open border. But seeing children suffer and not caring, something's wrong with your heart. There's something wrong. There's something deeply wrong about that kind of hardness. It's not the first time we've seen it, of course. It's the passage today, the story about Pharaoh, right? I mean, the story starts off, talk about ultimate family separation. The Pharaoh's afraid of the brown people who are multiplying, and he decides to tell the midwives to kill the baby boys. And when they resist, he makes their life more difficult. He takes away the straw and forces them to make bricks. And then when Moses, Dr. King, shows up to go toe to toe with Pharaoh, then Pharaoh's heart is hardened. The Hebrew wants to make sure we get the Pharaoh's heart is hardened because we're told at least 10 times. And the rabbis all wondered about it because the first 5 or 6 times, it's clear that Pharaoh hardens his own heart, becomes stiff and stubborn. And then like the 6th time, God and Pharaoh are in on it together. And then the last 3 or 4 times, God just hardens it. And the only, explanation they came up with was at the start, there was kind of room maybe for transformation, seeing the people suffering. The water turned to blood, the boils and the gnats. But as it went on, his heart just became more hardened, darker and colder. But thankfully, of course, he's not the only character in the story. And of course, the main character is Moses. Moses, who goes toe to toe with Pharaoh. Moses, who reminds us that in the face of evil, we can't back down. We have to resist. We have to meet it, right? This is what we've seen before. This is John Lewis leading that crowd across that bridge in Selma, coming right up to those Alabama state troopers. This is the little girl, her black braids, walking up that steep step into that school while the white people jeer and throw rocks. This is the young teenage men and women sitting erect and straight, trying to desegregate a lunch counter while people pull them and spit on them, right? And this is not meeting Pharaoh with Pharaoh, hate with hate, darkness with darkness. It's meeting hatred with love. And that was the exact centerpiece of Dr. King, was nonviolence. John Lewis, Dr. King, those little kids, those teenagers, the grandparents, they didn't meet hatred with hatred, a dark heart with a dark heart, but with an open heart. That's the central message of Dr. King. We think of him, of course, as a great orator, a great preacher, a great leader, and we forget sometimes what a writer he was. Like here's the essential writings of Dr. King. Like, look how thick that is for a person assassinated at 39. But remember, he got his PhD from Boston University when he was 25. And his writings are so remarkable and deep. And at the heart of his writing was what? Love, 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 love. Not a namby-pamby love, but this love of nonviolence, this love that says, you can do anything you want me to do, but make me hate you. You cannot make me stoop so low to take away my ability to love you. The centerpiece of all of his writings was love. Love in action, the strength of love, the power of love, the experiment of love. I mean, he has these incredibly deep philosophical treatises in which he brings together, of course, the Sermon on the Mount with Mahatma Gandhi's teachings of nonviolence. And if I was going to sum up all of Dr. King's teaching in my simplified way, I would say the love he talks about is absolutely indifferent to 2 things: others and outcomes. It's indifferent to others because you don't love the person in front of you because they're your lover or your enemy. You love because they're your neighbor. It's a love that has nothing to do with how the other comes at you, spitting you, kicking at you, clubbing at you. No, you love independently. It's a love grounded, that Apostle Paul love, agape, chapter 13, a love that is grounded in the deep well of God, a love that is unconditional and never ending, a love that comes from this spring inside that can never be stopped or silenced, right? And it's a love that's indifferent to outcomes. You don't decide to love because it looks like, it looks like Governor Wallace is going to change, right? It looks like Governor Falbus is about to give up. It looks like Jeff Sessions is about to say, I'm sorry. No, you love because it's the right thing to do. Vaclav Havel, all the great leaders have said that, right? You don't hope because now your effort has a good chance of succeeding. You hope because it's the right thing to do, indifferent of the outcomes. And Dr. King, he didn't just sit in his office and write, did he? No, he got out there and he lived it. He was only 25 years old when he was called to be the preacher at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. That was 1954. 1955 would be a big year for that young man. He would get his PhD that June from Boston University. That November, Dr. King and Coretta would give birth to their first little child, Yolanda. And in December 1st, Rosa Parks would decide she wasn't getting up from her seat. So the bus boycott began. And Dr. King, a newcomer really to Montgomery, at a historic church, but a smaller church across from the state capitol, he became the president of the Montgomery Improvement Alliance. And all of a sudden, he was 26, leading this bus boycott. And we think of it as, Rosa Parks, but no, 381 days that bus boycott went on. And that meant 381 days that people who wanted to feed their family had to get to work, right? That meant organization. That meant churches buying station wagons with their church name on them that they used to take people to and from work. That meant meetings, one after another, mass meetings, 2 a week, then 1 a week, where Dr. King and others taught about Gandhi's idea of nonviolence along with the Sermon on the Mount. And that meant incredible pressure and death threats. By late January 1956, 6 weeks into the bus boycott, Dr. King was getting 30 to 40 death threats a day in the mail. KKK, people were serious. They were clear. 25 phone calls at least a day, obscenely coming into his house, saying how he was going to destroy his family. Very, very credible threats of assassination attempts. He had his own dark night of the soul that he wrote about. One day in January when he just crumpled, so weary, trying to keep people's spirits up as they knew this would drag on longer, and the pressure and the eyes and the people looking at a man who just turned 27 with a newborn, and Daddy King in Atlanta, his mom and dad wanting him to come home. You're not going to make it. They'll get you. They'll kill you. So it was on January 30th at the mass meeting on that Monday night when King was there on the platform at the First Baptist Church of Montgomery. There were 2,000 people in the church. They were filling the aisles. They were sitting in the pews. They were in the doorways. They were in the door frames. When he saw his friend and mentor, Ralph Abernathy, with the church ushers, and he knew there was something wrong, and Abernathy came to the front of the church and told him there'd been a bombing at his house. They weren't sure about Coretta and Yolanda, the 9-week-old. Dr. King had stood up and he had told the people to pray. He told people to go home in peace, to believe and to keep working, and to remember that only nonviolence and only love would win. He had arrived home to find that the bomb had exploded on the front porch, glass, wood everywhere. He'd gone in there to find his wife and his newborn safe. By that point, a large crowd had gathered, a large crowd of people, many of them African American, who were concerned and worried and frankly angry that they had wanted to sit down on a bus because they paid the fare, that they'd wanted to vote to elect leaders, that they had wanted to send their kids to schools and sit down at a lunch counter and use a restroom. And for this, they swung from the trees. For this, they were lynched and murdered and killed and pushed and spit upon. And King was there with this almost riot in his front yard. The white police were there, the very police who had been arresting the people who were in the bus boycott, arresting grandmothers and grandfathers who were just trying to get people to work. And he went out into his yard and he spoke to the crowd. He spoke to the African American, the young men, the older ones, and he said, if you brought a weapon, put it down. If you don't have a weapon, don't get one. The only way to win is to love your enemies, is to love your white brothers and sisters. This is a man whose wife and 9-week-old were nearly killed. And he went out there and said, love these people. You're afraid. You're worried about what might happen the next week. You're unsure and you're discouraged. You feel despair about how our country got to this point. Maybe you're angry. You're angry at the people who stoked this and allowed it to go on and said he's learning his lesson. He won't do it again. Angry at the corporations who've supported this crap while their stocks have gone through the roof. Try anyway. Love anyway. Act anyway. Show up anyway. Get involved anyway. Give anyway. Open your treasures and pour out your heart. Love the next person you see. Love the person so troubled and dark anyway. Because who knows, maybe somebody will see you. Somebody who is about to give up. Somebody who is about to pick up a rock, and maybe they'll put it down. Maybe somebody who is near the end, about to take a whole bottle of pills. And they'll see you act, and they'll feel inspired and encouraged and heartened to go on one more day. May the legacy and the life of Dr. King, the late John Lewis, the little girl who walked into that schoolhouse, the young men and women, may their example hearten us and strengthen us that we might love. Amen.